so gallantly streaming. Hail the rockets, break away.
John Paul Sheptock was a trusted worship pastor, a shining member of his community, and the winner of several singing competitions in Texas. While he was content leading worship music in church, John wanted more. He wanted to be famous. He built profiles on multiple online platforms and made sure to always share his story of being born without arms. He framed it as turning his test into his testimony, and people ate it up, believing that this husband and father was a man of faith who they and their children could look up to. But John should have been kept away from the children, because this so-called godly man allegedly had ulterior motives. When a young woman walked into a police station in 2025 and told police that a pastor at a local church had been blackmailing her since she was a minor, they couldn't believe what they were hearing. While John was building a reputation in churches and on stage, even performing at a Trump rally, he was using Snapchat to blackmail a teenager, and he blackmailed her for nearly a decade. When cops got a warrant and searched his house, what they found raised even more disturbing questions. John was arrested in September of 2025, and his Baptist church would never be the same again. This is the case of Pastor John Paul Sheptock. Before we begin, please allow me to tell you about the sponsor of this video, FreeCash. FreeCash is available on iOS and Android and is a rewards app where you can earn extra money by doing things you already do on your phone, like playing games, trying apps, or completing quick offers. While it sounds too good to be true, FreeCash has a 4.7-star rating with over 250,000 reviews on Trustpilot. When you open FreeCash, you'll see a bunch of offers. I usually pick game offers because I already play mobile games to relax, so it doesn't feel like adding a new task to my day. All you need to do is follow the task in the offer and make sure app tracking is enabled so FreeCash can verify your progress and reward you properly. I started this offer and played a bit in my free time. You can also see your progress inside FreeCash and how much you've already earned. Now, the most important part, cashing out. FreeCash lets you withdraw your earnings in multiple ways, including PayPal, crypto, and gift cards. Personally, I usually go with PayPal because it's fast and convenient. You can start earning extra money right now by scanning the QR code on screen or clicking the link in the description box below to get started with FreeCash today. You'll get a $5 bonus on your first offer, and you can earn even more if someone signs up using your referral code inside the app. Once again, scan the QR code or click the link in the description box below to get started. Thank you, FreeCash, for sponsoring this video and supporting the channel. John Paul Sheptock was born in New Jersey in 1976 with severe congenital deformities. He was born without arms, and his right leg was 6 inches shorter than his left, conditions that would shape nearly every part of his life. His biological mother didn't even bother holding him after his birth and placed him directly into foster care, a fact he made sure to mention in every one of his online bios. For the first 6 months of his life, John remained in the foster system before being adopted by a couple who believed caring for children with disabilities was their calling. But they made the Duggars look like a small nuclear family. Once John entered the picture, he became their 37th child. The 39-member Sheptock family was a mix of biological children, adopted children, and adopted grandchildren, many of whom had disabilities or serious medical conditions of their own. Growing up in such a large family meant John's childhood was anything but typical. Even basic milestones were difficult. Because of his condition, John was unable to crawl as a baby and didn't walk until around the age of 4. School brought its own set of struggles for John. He was ridiculed and bullied by classmates, with some students spitting on him or mocking his appearance. The rejection created a deep sense of isolation during his teenage years, and as a result, John struggled with self-doubt and even harmful thoughts, until one day he found religion. John would later describe this as a turning point in his life. In his many retellings of turning his test into his testimony, where he pretended to be a man of faith instead of a predator lurking in the shadows, he said that instead of giving up, he became a Christian, believing that his God had a plan for him despite his disabilities. His faith also led him to meet his wife. Together, they would go on to have 3 daughters, children he often featured on his YouTube channel. One thing John discovered early on was that he had an unusual gift: he could sing. By his own account, music became both an outlet and a purpose. By the late 2000s, John had settled in Montgomery County, Texas, just north of Houston, and had begun performing Christian music at churches, conferences, and religious events across the U.S. In April of 2009, he was given a chance to perform at a Bill Gaither Homecoming Tour event, a concert series well known in Christian gospel music. He soon began releasing recorded music and promoting himself through online platforms used by independent musicians, including an artist page on Reverb Nation. His goal was clear: to build a following not just as a church singer, but as a Christian recording artist and speaker whose life story was part of the message. John wanted to be famous. Instead, he'd become infamous. John continued building an identity of a man who had overcome extraordinary odds, someone whose life story was meant to inspire others. By 2011, John's performances were taking him into new spaces. He continued traveling to churches and conferences, but he also became involved in prison outreach programs, including the One Percenters Prison Ministry, a church outreach group that sends speakers and musicians into state prisons to share religious messages with inmates. From that point forward, prison ministry became a recurring part of his work. In front of the inmates, he performed music and told the story he had shared countless times before: a childhood filled with rejection, bullying, and physical limitations, followed by a religious conversion that he said gave his life direction. For the inmates who could relate to feeling like outcasts, the message resonated. Here was a man born without arms, standing in front of them, singing and encouraging others not to give up. The speaking engagements and performances only reinforced John's public image, and he felt like his star was rising. He loved preaching to the prisoners, never believing that one day he would be one of them. Behind closed doors, John's private life was moving in a very different direction than his public one. While the public commended him and saw him as a hero, in private, he was using his position as a man of faith to allegedly exploit a teenage girl. In 2016, a 17-year-old high school student who has never been publicly identified became the target of a blackmail scheme that would eventually become the center of a criminal case. We'll refer to the victim as Jane Doe. John was very close with Jane's family, so much so that she called him Uncle John. John also did the family's taxes for them, and this is where it's believed he got the information to get into their iCloud account. Once he was in, he found a nude image that the 17-year-old had secretly taken for her boyfriend's eyes only. John stole her photo and then logged into his Snapchat account with the username Zane. Authorities allege John sent the photo back to her as proof that he had it. After sending the picture, John told Jane he wanted more explicit photos. When she hesitated and didn't send him anything, he sent her a video of someone being physically assaulted and told her he'd hate for something like that to happen to her. The message was clear: Pastor John was blackmailing and threatening a child. Jane felt she had nowhere to turn. Her parents were extremely religious, and she worried about how they would react if they learned she had taken a nude photo in the first place. If she went to the police, her parents would still find out because she was a minor. Feeling as if she couldn't confide in her own family or the authorities, and fearing John's threats, she relented. Sometime after this, Jane's family went over to John's house. John took her into his office and had her come over to his computer, where he proudly showed her images of young nude girls, some who she recognized as his daughter's friends. Fear played a major role in why Jane stayed silent and refused to come forward. Little did she know that John would blackmail her for nearly a decade. Throughout all this, John's public life remained unchanged. While his victim lived in fear every day of her life, he continued singing and entertaining, pretending to be a good husband and father, and traveling to prisons to preach about holiness, sin, and redemption. He had no fear of becoming a prisoner himself because he believed he was untouchable. It's clear that John wasn't thinking about what they do to pedophiles in prison. He was only thinking about fame. John promoted his music heavily online. He maintained social media accounts, a YouTube channel, and artist profiles where he shared performances, music, and promotional material in an effort to grow his audience. He had already been competing since the early 2000s, winning 2 titles in 2007, Superstar America, in which he sang Michael Bublé's Home, and Huntsville Superstar, where he sang Steve Fee and Casting Crowns' All About Jesus. Although John never became a major figure in Christian music, it didn't stop him from trying. A few years later, he sang the national anthem for the Houston Astros and Houston Texans, appearances that would help him promote his story as an inspirational performer. In 2018, John began working as a worship minister at First Montgomery Baptist Church. His role involved choosing and organizing the music each week and leading the worship band during church services. According to the church, Pastor John had a heart for theologically accurate worship and encouraged the congregation to actively participate. Outside of church, John continued seeking broader exposure. His highest profile performance came years later in January of 2022, when John performed the national anthem at a rally for Trump in Conroe, Texas.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets love bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave?
Look, there's a gate right here.
Oh, the land of the free, and the home of the brave.
For John, it was exactly the kind of exposure he craved. Photos and videos from the rally circulated online, adding another significant moment to the carefully built image of a man overcoming disability through faith and patriotism. But that manufactured authenticity would come crumbling down just 3 years later, when Jane had had enough. When Jane got married in 2020, John stopped blackmailing her and stopped requesting photos. But like a true predator, he was keeping tabs on her, and once she got divorced in 2023, he started blackmailing her again. But one day, the victim decided the fear of exposure hurt less than the pain and humiliation John was putting her through. She was 26 years old when she walked into the police station and told them that a man of faith, a man her family and church trusted, had been blackmailing and essaying her for nearly a decade. In August of 2025, detectives with the Montgomery County Human Trafficking and Child Exploitation Unit were informed that it was believed John was in possession of explicit material involving minors. For the next several weeks, and with the help of Jane, investigators quietly built their case, tracing digital evidence and developing probable cause. Then, a search warrant was issued for his home, and on the night of September 26th of 2025, the police took action. They showed up in force at John's home, ready to take him to jail, but he wasn't there. Detectives learned he was miles away, not hiding, but ministering. On the day of his arrest, John was inside the Dr. Lane Murray Unit, a women's correctional facility in Central Texas, singing and leading a worship service for inmates. In a twist of irony, law enforcement coordinated with the Texas Department of Public Safety to locate and arrest him inside the prison. The wannabe celebrity was now joining the prisoners he proselytized to, thankfully in a men's unit. John was charged with promotion of child pornography, a third-degree felony under Texas law, a charge that encompasses possession, production, and distribution of explicit material involving minors. Inside his home, investigators searched devices and storage they believed could contain evidence. Authorities reportedly found explicit photos and communication involving minors, adding to concerns about the scope of the alleged conduct. Though many details remain sealed in official filings, court documents referenced by reporters indicate that detectives had collected messaging and media that supported the allegations that led them to seek the warrant. News of the arrest hit the First Montgomery Baptist Church hard. John had been serving there as a worship minister, and within days of his arrest, church leadership confirmed that he had been removed from all ministry duties. But still, people were worried that maybe John had gotten close to their children. In statements to members, church leaders expressed that John did not have direct supervisory responsibility over children in his role, though he occasionally interacted with them in larger group settings with adults present. But John had inappropriately interacted with Jane when adults were present too. The church stressed they were cooperating fully with detectives as the investigation continued. Days after the arrest, church leadership turned over a church-owned computer for law enforcement to examine, again emphasizing their cooperation and concern about whether any church property contained unlawful content. As the case moved into the legal system, John was initially held in a county jail before he was released on bond while authorities worked on the extradition to Montgomery County to face formal proceedings. At the time of this recording, there have been no widely reported updates, and the case remains active with the legal process continuing, including pretrial hearings, discovery, and possible negotiations or scheduling for trial. Like all defendants, John Paul Sheptock is presumed innocent until proven guilty in court. For those following the story, the lack of a public resolution so far means there's still space for developments including court hearings, possible indictments, and motions in the months ahead. The allegations and arrest have left a church and many in the community grappling between the shining image John portrayed and the charges facing him now. Unfortunately, cases like this one aren't unique, especially in the church. Time and time again, stories surface of religious leaders who present themselves as moral guides while taking advantage of those who trust in them. For now, it seems that the full truth about John's actions will be revealed in court. Jane was put through hell for nearly a decade, a hell that started when she was a minor. But because of her bravery in coming forward, one more predator is behind bars. This has been the case of John Sheptock.